Hey guys, Ted Bogert with the TED Show. We're back. I have a very distinguished panel with me, friends of mine, friends of the show, friends of our community, and I decided that I wanted to try to put together a panel where I ask some of the questions and the things that I see on social media, in the media, questions that I get asked by people, things that I see people asking other people questions. I want to discuss those and ask those, and I want to create an open dialogue. And I believe I picked three people who have strong opinions, are passionate and compassionate. If I can get, oops, I see her. There she is. We're adding Dr. McCauley's on the show too. We are live. Hello, Pamela. How are you?
Hello, Ted. How are you?
Welcome. All right. So we haven't even done intros. So we're going to start. And I'm going to start with Rhetta. Rhetta, tell us a little bit about you. Rhetta Hussein. And by the way, huge heartfelt thanks. All of you agreeing to be on the panel.
Oh no,
Pleasure.
thanks for having me. My name is Rhetta Hussein. I'm a journalist for the Black Press, and I also own a small marketing and advertising firm here in Orlando.
Fantastic. All right, Hank, you're next. What's up, Hank?
Hi, Ted. I'm Hank Van Putten. I am a diversity and inclusion trainer and facilitator for the Peace and Justice Institute at Valencia College.
Thank you. And I'm just going in order, Pamela. Victor, you're up. Maybe. Hi, Victor.
Victor Cherry, life transformation coach. I try to answer the questions best as I can. I'm, on my way back to Orlando for vacation. So hopefully I can answer
I want to be on
questions.
vacation. I'm glad you're here. Hey, Dr. McCauley, Pamela, how are you? Tell us a little bit about
I'm doing great, Ted. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly.
Wonderful. I had challenges with this headset a little earlier today. As Ted said, my name is Pamela McCauley. I am, up until May of this year, I was a faculty member at the University of Central Florida in the Department of Industrial Engineering, where I spent 27 years on the faculty at UCF. I have since accepted what we call a courtesy appointment at UCF. That is so I can advise my graduate students to completion. But I've accepted the position of Associate Dean of Academic Programs, Diversity and Inclusion at North Carolina State University in the Wilson College of Textiles. And it sounds like I am in very good company, very impressed with you all, and glad to know we have true diversity experts on the line, because I do not consider myself a D&I expert. My background, as I said, I may or may not have said, but it's industrial engineering. And I got my first engineering degree over 30 years ago. So I've had the opportunity to live this walk, this diversity and inclusion walk, or the lack thereof. And so I'm very happy to be here with you, Ted, and this panel to discuss this important issue.
Thank you all. So my goal, and so as people are joining us, hopefully they will see, I have taken a lot of comments and questions and things that I have seen, and some of it's going to seem, again, very elementary, and some of the questions might seem like, Ted, you really don't know what that is, but I'm asking it because there are a lot of people, even me, reaching out to you all. I thought, do I even have a right to do this? I should feel good about asking my friends these questions, and yet there was still a holdback. I was still thought, well, I don't want to seem disingenuous with my desire to have an open dialogue. I don't want to minimize anything. I want to ask the right questions. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to ask the questions that I see, and we're just going to go with the flow. So some of them are going to seem maybe a little challenging. I'm going to push back a little bit because that's what I see, but understand I'm the messenger. I don't have to tell you all that, but I want to tell the audience that I'm the messenger, and I want to ask the questions that a lot of people have, and they don't seem to either listen or they're not getting it, and I'm hoping that you can help. All right, I want to talk about, the first thing I want to dive into is Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter has so many different components, but one of the things that I did not understand in the beginning is, okay, Black Lives Matter. Why is that a separate thing? Why is it not all lives matter? And so I had to learn it too. So totally being vulnerable and transparent with you, I didn't understand that to begin with either. So if you're out there and you're thinking, well, I don't get it, well, you're going to get it by the time we're finished with these four amazing people, because I want them to explain or at least give their insights. So, Rhetta, I'm going to start with you since we're just going to go that way. Black Lives Matter. What is the difference? Why can't I say all lives matter? And are you saying that when we say that, and by you, I mean overall, the cohesive, are we saying that only Black lives matter and that Asian lives don't matter, blue lives don't matter, green lives don't matter, pick a life? Are you saying that? Can you give us a little bit of your insight on that?
Well, no, it definitely does not mean that all lives don't matter. All lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So we've got this issue in America today with law enforcement that is, using excessive, unnecessary force on Black people. And the movement started as Black Lives Matter to let everyone know we matter. We matter too. So what I think people don't understand is, for instance, if Susan Coleman organization focuses on breast cancer, they're not saying we don't give a rip about colon cancer. So it's not like we're saying we don't care about the other races. What we're saying is not equal. That's happening in society today.
One of the things that really struck me, and I'll ask everybody the same question, but struck me, Will Smith said, it's not that it's happening more, it's that we're videotaping it now.
Being filmed, yeah.
And so I think that people, when they hear Black Lives Matter, they go, well, it's just recently become a problem. It's only recently that you're seeing it, and that's because of X, Y, Z, and they try to explain it away. And yet I truly believe that what he said is true, is that it's because we are capturing more of what you all have already experienced for so long. Hank, what's your thoughts?
I was looking for something that I saved. It says, white people who say all lives matter are like the founding fathers who wrote all men are created equal while owning enslaved Africans. I think that when there is a need for a place at the table, and specifically in this case, we're talking about Black people. We could be talking about brown people. We could be talking about people who identify as other races and or ethnicities. But to have a place at the table that is specifically for Black lives is extremely important in a time of racial terror, because all lives do matter. Sure, that's not saying something that folks don't believe. But what is more important to say is that Black Lives Matter because our place at the table has been taken up by so many other issues that oftentimes the life of a Black person, a man or a woman, is not taken as seriously. In studying and in reading about periods of enslavement, there were times where a Black person clearly, and we all know the history of enslavement, was treated inappropriately. And in that case, that life did not matter. Well, it's time to acknowledge that that life does matter, and it matters today, and that it continues to matter just as it should each and every day in each and every way. I'm just shocked at why people have so much difficulty saying Black Lives Matter. That continues to be a shock for me.
I agree. But I have to say, I didn't understand it. It didn't mean that I disagreed with it. I just didn't understand where it was coming from. And I think that people need to educate themselves, me included, on where the perspective is instead of assuming that you know the answer. Pamela, what do you think?
Well, I want to pick up a little bit where Hank left off, and when there is not only enough going on today that it's not only important but necessary for us to actually say the words Black Lives Matter, but our nation has a historical precedent where they have demonstrated that Black lives, in fact, did not matter. We were counted as 3/5 of a person in 1787, the compromise, and so these are our founding fathers writing the Declaration and counting a human as 3/5 of a person. So there's a historical nature. And then let's fast forward 400 years to today, where African American men are, by conservative estimates of data, are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police. Some estimates are as much as 4 to 5 times as likely. So it's disingenuous for people to say all lives matter when we have one group that is consistently and continually and historically marginalized. So the good people have a responsibility to stand up and say what needs to be said. And in this case, it is that Black Lives Matter.
Yes, beautiful. How about you, Victor? What's your thought process? You there, Victor? Well, he might not be with us.
I guess it's like the areas.
All right, so I'm going to go to my next question. You guys brought up something about the experience. Have you all been the victim of racial profiling? Have you had that experience in your life as a human being? Because I think it's important that people hear what I have never felt unsafe around, I'll use law enforcement, it could be in any situation. That's never been something I felt like somebody was targeting me for, or in a store, I have never felt like I've been looked at because I'm white. Have you all personally experienced that? And if so, can you give us just an example of what that was like? I'll start with you, Hank.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, before I say that, I want to also acknowledge what Pamela said about the historical piece around from the period of enslavement through today, and also what has become a generational trauma, where trauma is passed from one generation on to the next through no one's fault of their own. This isn't about blaming anyone. This is about recognizing that there's some symptoms that are influencing us all because we breathe the air, and it's all around us. And because of those symptoms, it's important that we recognize that the individual isn't the cause of the problem, but the individual is part of what the symptoms have created with regard to that problem. Now, just state your question once again, Ted, for me.
Yeah, have you been a victim of racial profiling? Have you experienced what we read about, what we've seen on all of the cameras that have caught things? Have you personally experienced that, or had somebody in your life that has personally experienced it?
Yes, I have. I have not been in the experiences that I've had. I've not had people be as physical with me, but I have been followed in stores. I have had people call the police to go to my house because they saw me walking around the outside of my house. I have had the experience of going to a ballpark and finding my own seat, and then watching the white ushers escort other white people to their seats. May seem like a small thing, but you notice it. And you notice those little things that happen, those little, as I refer to them, mosquito bites that happen and can happen every day. So yes, I have. Have I been to the extent that we see with violence being perpetrated against folks who are Black and brown? No, I've not. But I do know folks that have had that happen to them.
How about you, Pamela, as higher ed and everything that you've done? Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say from a police or law enforcement perspective, but I have consistently been marginalized. It gets a little tougher when you've been at this game for 30 years and a lot of people have come to know you. But even today, I mean, I have still experienced that sometimes. In addition to being a professor, I've owned a business for several years, engineering firm. And I remember one time I was going to the Pentagon to do a presentation. And the gentleman who worked for me happened to be white. And I remember the folks at the Pentagon, everyone kept talking to him and he kept telling them, she's the boss, you need to talk to her. So that's, just one example. But then even things like earlier in my career where people said, I actually had a counselor. I went to the University of Oklahoma. And I've always been so focused on doing things when I set my mind to it. I always said I probably experienced a lot more racism than I realized, but I'm just thinking, well, if I just work hard, my dad was a drill sergeant, mom was an optimist. So I'm thinking I can do all things. And Lord, I got Jesus too. So it doesn't even matter. So I think I probably experienced a lot more than I let get to me, which in some ways is good. But it's still the microaggressions that I think Hank mentioned that we're going through. And I don't know if you've heard the term, the black tax, Ted, we can talk about that later, but it's just another level of challenge that African-American or black people have to deal with in this country. And I was about to say, I had a counselor tell me, you're never going to get an engineering degree. And here I am working my tail off. I was a single mom, took my daughter to college with me. And if anybody had grit, that little subject that they're writing books about now and saying that's what it takes to make it, it would be someone like that. But because I was a black woman in Oklahoma, I really do believe that they did not expect for me to be successful. And of course, I've had that occur at different elements throughout my career. And it's frustrating. It's exhausting. And so you really do have to build yourself a strong network of people to help you manage through these times. But it's not right. It's good, downright racist and biased and in full effect.
Agreed. How about you, Rhetta? You're out in the black press. Have you personally experienced anything that Hank or Pamela or I have described?
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny is when you ask that question, I think we as Black people have been so abused that the first thing in my mind was, have I ever been beaten by a cop? Have I ever had that? But, when you think back to being followed in a store, and, even pulled over by a cop, there were little things that sometimes we don't even see. We see them. We just take them as, I'm a Black person, I'm gonna experience this. So yes, I've had that. But one thing I will say is that for Black men, it is no comparison. It is no comparison. Black men have it the worst.
I agree.
I have to say, just being in my neighborhood when we first moved in here, my husband and his best friend were outside doing something with the car. And immediately the police showed up, and they wanted to know. He had to pull out his identification and show that he lived here, that he lived at this house, and even in stores, he's been followed in stores. Also, he, met his friend at the grocery store and, they talked and, I don't know what happened after that, but the police came up and said that they believed that they were making a drug deal.
Jeez.
So I'm
Ted,
thinking,
go ahead, Rhetta, I'm sorry.
That's insane. Yes, Hank?
There's another layer, I appreciate that, Rhetta's comment about the burden, if you will, that Black men carry. But there's an intersectionality of identities that Black women have to go through as well. In addition to being Black, they are identified also as female. Some Black women also would identify as being gay, which is another layer that's added on to on there. Some of them may be Black, they may be gay, they may be Jewish. And so there's another layer of intersectionality that's added onto there. So that in addition to understanding the experience of a Black person, there's oftentimes the intersectionality of other aspects of identity that bring a whole new piece to the conversation. As Pamela mentioned, the people in the audience were asking the gentleman the question when she was the one who was in charge. All right, that's something that I have rarely experienced as a Black man. I have experienced it, but I can certainly imagine that Black women experience that sort of little interaction at a much greater rate than I would as a Black man.
Hank, thank you so much for bringing up intersectionality, because I make it a point never to argue who has it worse, Black men or Black women. I think that's not a good use of our time, but I have seen those kinds of discussions. But you're absolutely right. The fact is that you do have intersectionality, as you mentioned, if you're a woman, if you are a woman of color and you're gay, or like you mentioned, Jewish. So all of that actually matters. It really does. And I'll say this, that those meetings at the Pentagon, the white men weren't the only ones addressing the white man. Even the Black colonel was there, who was there. He was the one who he also addressed the team member, the white male who worked for me, and he consistently kept telling them to talk to me. So but I think it's so good that we are now talking about these things. The problem's been here forever. I was on a town hall earlier today with my university, North Carolina State University, and one of the students, a student of color, she said, "Why are we having town halls now? We didn't have them before, and Black people have been dying for a long time. Black men have been killed by police for a long time." And no one had a real answer for her, but I sort of, it reminds me of the book, Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. It's like there has been so much going on now, so much social unrest because of the injustices and the boldness. And then I think much of this political climate has emboldened the bias, those that are extremely biased, white supremacists, et cetera. And we are tired. And what's so beautiful is that other people like Ted, I thank you so much for doing this, and other people who don't look like us, to say this is not right and to speak up. So it really is. I pray that I'm right and that this season does lead to real change, because enough is enough. George Floyd.
I think we're all there, right?
Yeah.
We're there, Pamela. We're all at, and I haven't experienced anything of what you've experienced, and I'm there. So I can't imagine how you all who have seen it and felt it and grew up almost like it was the norm. One of you was mentioning, Rhetta said it. Well, the first thing I thought of was, I haven't been beat up by the police. Like your norm is so different. Your point of reference is so different than mine. And I want to talk about that, because I didn't understand the concept of white privilege until I was on Colorblind with Vanessa Eccles and Hank, and I believe Rhetta were on as well. And so I'm sitting there, and immediately, you kind of go, well, you can't be talking about me. White privilege to me at that point equated to white supremacist, and I'm not a white supremacist in my brain. And so it was so eye-opening for me for someone to talk about that. And so I want to ask you, because it seems to be people don't know how to separate the two. And by people, I mean white people. And we think if you are saying that we're white privileged, that you are saying the other. And maybe that is what you're saying, but I'd love for your input on that, because I think people get them confused, and then immediately they hear white privilege and they don't want to talk about it because you're accusing them of something, as if it's something that they chose to do. And maybe they did, but in reality, it's more about our existence and what has been systemically happening for so long. So I'll let anybody who wants to jump in on that talk about it, because I think it's really important that we stop worrying about what that word means and trying to help the situation out and have these open dialogues. So white privilege versus white supremacy.
I'll just take this one. I think privilege, and you'll never know what your privilege is unless look at what's really happening around you. Or if you're Black, you can't really understand what white privilege is if you're white and you've never been Black, which possibly do. So, I think that like Pamela said, perfect example. When she was in her meeting, everyone was talking to the white guy, not talking to her. That's the privilege that white guy has. He has that privilege. If we want to get down to numbers, look at the incarceration rate of Black people to white people when we aren't even 50% of the population or 40%. I think it's around 30%, and our population of Black men are in prison at higher numbers. So, and even when we look at financials, it's not just that Black people are just squandering money. Historically, we've never been it's been very difficult for the other generations to be able to pass down financial literacy because they didn't have it themselves. And as far as wealth is concerned, we didn't have that either. And then when we did build it, that was torn down. That's a whole nother story we won't go into, but.
No, but you're so right, Rhetta.
Please go ahead, Pamela.
Thank you. I was just say you're so right, and when I first started hearing what the term white privilege, I wasn't exactly sure what it meant, but I think it is important for us to get comfortable understanding that. So it's not privilege because you're better or more important. It's what the construct of this society has created, and so as we think about. I love your point, Rhetta, about, financially. I mean, one of the greatest sources of wealth that is passed down is home ownership. And we know even in the 60s and the 70s, there were actively doing things to keep African Americans and Black people from owning homes. And so and then in addition to not having the financial literacy, then when you can get it, your husband standing in front of his own home and being questioned about who he is. So I think it's important that we do get honest about this. No, just because you recognize, I'm not sure who this young child is, a Black young lady on Facebook saying she's not going to recognize white privilege because she's just as important as that, and we have to just pray for people like that, because I don't want things like that to sideline the conversation and the progress that can and should be made at this time. But it is necessary for us to understand that it's real. It's real.
Hank?
I think that one of the biggest pushbacks against white privilege by white people is that to acknowledge that white privilege exists is to acknowledge that racism and race exist. And if you don't acknowledge that you have a white privilege, then you're not going to acknowledge that there is race and racism. What I'm looking for is something that I used in a session last week where we had 25 different graphs, and we asked the participants to go through them. The one that stood out for me the most, I'll read you the title. It says, "One common way to illustrate the gender and race wage gap is through looking at equal pay days for different groups." So a white man who begins on January the 1st, it takes an Asian woman till almost the end of February, 42 days to make as much money. It takes a white woman 100 days to make as much money. It takes a Black person 226 days to make as much. And it takes a Hispanic person over 300 days to make as much money. That's white privilege. That's white privilege. That's where it comes from. That's what this. I said this before when we talked before, Ted. White men have decided what goes on in this country since the beginning, and that's changing. And of course, when it changes, then if you're a white person, you're like, well, what am I giving up here? Are they going to do to me what I did to them? There's going to be more of them than there are of me, and I'm going to be, what are they going to do to me? Well, I really appreciate Pamela mentioning the Lord, because the Lord doesn't say that you go out and you hurt somebody else just because they hurt you. That's not what the Lord says. So, if the white birth rate is decreasing at the same time that the global majority birth rate is increasing, then yes, white people at a point in the very near future are not going to be in the majority in this country. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just what is going to happen. Now, when that happens, I'll use the I statement. I can be confident that folks of the global majority are not going to be trying to enslave white people.
Correct.
I can almost guarantee that's not what folks of color are about, because there's a saying that recently, with all of the racial unrest, that white people ought to be glad that folks of color are looking for equality and not revenge. Because if you're looking for revenge, it would be an entirely different conversation. Looking for equality, looking for equity.
And if your brain, I feel like if your brain goes to that, Hank, if you're someone who's of white privilege, or if you're a white person and you're white privileged, and your brain goes to worrying about revenge, you probably have a lot of things you need to work on, because you are probably the epitome of what they're talking about, utilizing the white privilege. Because if you're worried about revenge or retribution or payback for your horrible actions, that's probably what you're worried about. That thought process you just shared never even occurred to me, because all I can think about is how can I make it right or better? And I feel like there are white people, a lot of white people who want the same thing, just don't exactly know how to go about it, which is why these dialogues are so critical. Like, I think I know what I'm doing. I have no earthly idea. I think I told you before we went live that I've been told, well, why is your business to bring this up? Why? They don't have to educate you, Ted. And I'm like, that's the problem. It shouldn't be a they thing. It's human beings. I want to learn. I want to understand. I want to do better. I want to continue to do better. And I believe, maybe I'm an optimist, that people do want to do better. But they have to understand first and be willing to accept some of the things that may not be so comfortable and have the uncomfortable conversations. I want to talk about, there's so much. Before we went live, obviously, I posted this several times to kind of solicit some kind of response. One of the top things people asked about was taking a knee. And so I know that might sound like a simple thing and an outdated thing, but every single time it happens and it becomes news, there becomes a whole nother uproar about it. So I thought it would be great if you could explain what that means. Does that mean that the person taking the knee hates all Americans, that they hate all white people, that they hate the Pledge of Allegiance, that they hate the flag, that they hate, people associate hate with that? And I think that's part of the problem, is that is so not what it's about. But I'm a white guy coming from white privilege, and I would much rather hear it from you all.
No, of course it doesn't mean that they hate America. I mean, it's time to, I consider taking a knee to actually be taking a stand, having the courage to take a stand against racism and the injustices that we know are so prevalent in so many areas of our society. I mean, do people who fly the Confederate flag love the Confederate and hate the United States because they won? I mean, so let's get real about it. So it bothers me that has been so blown out of proportion. First of all, Black people have loved this country so long, and when it didn't love us back, and we all know that. I mean, and so we have consistently shown that over and over again. But I want to get back for just a second, Ted, to a point you made. I love your heart, Ted, and you are so about the right thing and doing the right thing. But let's just think about this. Rhetta, I think you mentioned the country's about going to become majority minority. And the years 2045 is when we expect for America to be majority minority. Now, I heard a speaker from the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities said he gave a talk in Oklahoma, my home state, which is so white. Okay, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And so conservative. And he was talking to them about the importance of them encouraging students, underrepresented minority students, to get an education. He said that he was speaking to a largely, like 90% of the audience was more mature white folks. And he said, if you care about your investment, your future, your country, the future for your children, you would be encouraging every Black and brown student you know to get an education, and even emphasizing STEM, because these are going to be the people that keep this country going. You, out of selfish interest, even if they don't have the heart of Ted Bogert, should be interested in seeing their future for their children, their grandchildren, and the nation be strong. And the way to do that is to promote, first of all, fairness and equality, and then make sure that they have access to these opportunities. I mean, even if you're selfish, it would make sense. You could make a case for it.
Yes.
Ted, I would I also appreciate your heart, because it lives out the first of the 13 principles that we use at the Peace and Justice Institute, and that is creating a hospitable and accountable community. That we all arrive at isolations, and we want the generosity of friendly welcomes when we get there. So I think that what you're doing here with forums such as this is creating that hospitable and accountable community, so that it's a conversation and not a confrontation. And again, I very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
The thing about taking a knee, the thing about putting names on the back of jerseys, the thing about renaming the Washington football team, that's great. Those are all wonderful things. And in the same way that folks said that, we're post-racial because we had a Black president, I don't want to see us say, okay, we've solved racism because we got all of these other these things going on. I read a couple of weeks ago that the Big Ten Conference, I believe it has undertaken a huge voter registration initiative as part of their response to the Big Ten's response to what's going on in the country right now. Now, those types of things mean a whole lot more to me than taking a knee. Yes, taking a knee is because of he took a knee, Colin Kaepernick, because of the systems of oppressions that are in place that so many people don't see and so many people refuse to talk about. But if we get hung up on taking a knee, we're not going to be looking at the larger picture around voter registration, around the census. This is a huge piece coming up right now. During this election cycle is the census, because if folks are not counted and counted accurately, money goes along with each and every one of those people. And if they're not counted accurately, then that means that money is going to go somewhere else. And those congressional district lines are going to be drawn in a different way that perpetuate rather than dismantle, this system of advantage that is in place. So do I agree with taking a knee? Absolutely. Same way I agreed with what John Carlos and Tommy Smith did back in 1968. Same way I agreed with what Muhammad Ali did. The same way that I agree with what Maya Moore is doing now, giving up her entire season as a professional basketball player to not only work on her ministry, but also to work on issues of social justice, where she was just able, after months and years of work, to get a person freed from prison who was wrongly accused. So is taking a knee important to me? Yes, it is important to me, but I wish people wouldn't get so hung up on the fact that that's a part of the song. It's not the entire song. It's a part of the song. And if we just focus on that one note, we're not going to get to the rest of the song.
Yes. Well put, my friend. How about you, Rhetta?
Yeah, with taking a knee, the one thing that bothers me about that is that people have seen, and I'll say a lot of white people, see that as revenge, or like you said, or that he's treasonous, or he hates white people. They have not seen what he is taking a knee for. and that's the Black lives. They've seen everything else and refuse to see that.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I have a real problem with. What he did was a peaceful protest. That's the reason our soldiers go and fight. He did exactly what his right was, to do. And I don't understand people when they see things that way, when they, kind of get into those conversations of who he is and then they're upset because he took a knee. Well, you know what? What are we looking at now? My daughter's generation is out there, not my daughter, but my daughter's generation is out there throwing bottles and tearing stuff up and doing all this other stuff because they're unheard. No one hears them. So, and that's not what we want, but they're upset about that. But when Colin tried to do it peacefully, they were upset about that too.
Well, I think that the biggest thing, any kind of discussion, I'll use the word discussion instead of argument, that I have when people talk about it is that just what you all are saying is you're seeing this face value thing. And also we're sort of all in the media in some way, shape or form. I'm not a real big fan of mainstream media for this reason, either side. If you're going to do sides, is that we paint this picture for ratings and then we never flesh it out. We never talk about what's really going on.
Right.
We talk about what's going to get ratings. And then the more we get frothy, the more the snowball effect gets into it. And then people are saying stupid things about taking a knee or whatever it is they want to say. And they haven't done any research. Somebody told them that that's what they needed to say. And that's where so much of this ignorance comes from. If you ask somebody, why do you think that way? And they have to hesitate for a long time or can't answer you. They are sheeps to the slaughter. They have just gone along with something that somebody told them a year ago, 5 years ago, their whole life, and they're just going to believe it. And if they can't stand for it, sometimes it's easier for them just to go along to the slaughter than to question it. And I think that's why these kinds of discussions are just so critical. We have to question why me, think the way that what white people think, the way we react. Why do we react the way that we react? Why are we threatened? Why are we not all trying to work together? And again, that's Pollyanna Ted. But I feel like there is a way, I believe that it can be done. One of the things that is really prevalent, and it's a tough topic, but I'd love to get your insight, and you can go as deep as you'd like. You can pass it along. But I want to talk about the relationship with the police and what's going on. Defund the police is the new war cry. And by new, I mean, it's the one that's getting a lot of attention right now. It's always been sort of there. And so you have all sides of it. And I'll tell you that an automatic across the board stroke of a brush is never the way I like to handle things. But I like to talk about it. I want to hear about it because I have had people say, if you bring up defund the police, Ted, I'm going to have a fit on your show. And I don't want to have a fit. I want to talk about it. I want to know why that's even a thought process. I think I know, but I'm not on the other end. I don't. So can you all kind of give me an idea of what you think about that? Because that is one of the biggest buzz phrases that's going on in one of the biggest movements.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think, first of all, I think that folks need to suspend their judgment and challenge their assumptions about what defunding the police actually means. I also believe that isn't the right way to express redistribution of funds. Reallocation of funds is what that statement around defunding the police means. Doesn't mean that they're going to close off all the police stations all around the country and it's going to be mass chaos as is presented by 45 in his ads. But what it does mean is that the monies that would ordinarily go for bringing military type equipment into our cities now is put toward issues around social justice. Now maybe goes to the schools to increase the funding for Title I, which is the reading program. Now may go into community programs that allows for parents to stay at work a little bit longer, knowing that their kids are going to be safe. Again, I start out by saying suspending judgment, challenging your assumptions about what defunding means. But I'm of the belief that the more accurate way to describe it is a redistribution, a reallocation of funds to places that are needed versus, again, the one that always stands out in my mind are the military type of equipment that are in our cities now that are only used on the battlefield.
Right.
And I'm talking about in war, not in our cities as they're being used now. So when I hear that phrase, defund, I know that a lot of white people are thinking, and I'll be blunt. When I say a lot of white people are thinking, they just want to get rid of the police so they can do whatever they want to do, because that's how it comes across to me. That's my I statement, if you will. And Ted, I'm very big on making sure I say I statements as opposed to those people and them. But again, it's about a redistribution, a reallocation of funds. From if a police department has $1 billion budget, taking $100,000 out to put it toward a social program that and something that Pamela said earlier, that if you increase the opportunities for students, especially Black and brown students, especially those students who may be marginalized as we know they are, if you increase their opportunities, you're going to be increasing your opportunities as well.
That's right.
So those are my thoughts about defunding. And how the word resonates for me. When I hear it, they're going to go the wrong way with this.
I agree. I think, and Rhetta, I'll go to you next. I feel like exactly what you said. People think that immediately that it's going to go into a complete state of anarchy, and that's the ultimate goal. So that you all, and I mean other than white people, are going to get their revenge, and there's going to be retribution, and now you're going to get away with everything. All those things that you just said are some of the crazy things that I've also heard, and that's one of the reasons I'm so motivated to have these conversations, because people believe it to the point of it's their reality. That's what's going to happen if you defund the police. And the redistribute, I think it's the wording. I forget who said that. It was probably Hank. It's the wording. All right, Rhetta, what about you?
I have to piggyback on Hank with that. It should be shifting the funds of the police. When it comes to mental health issues, you see so many police officers, law enforcement that go and shoot or beat up, people with schizophrenia and, all these different types of mental issues. They're killing them or mishandling them because they don't understand what they're going through. So I think that money needs to be invested in either law enforcement taking along a mental health expert when they go to these calls, or having a complete division of officers who are trained specifically to deal with mental health issues. Things like that is what I believe the defund the police is all about.
I agree with that, Rhetta. And Hank, thank you so much for both of you for, creating a real picture of what I believe the people are saying when they say defund the police. And clearly, I don't think many responsible adults, even young adults, want to see the police truly defunded. And I certainly don't want to see the police defunded. And if you think about if they are defunded and we have mass anarchy, white Americans own guns about 50% more of the time or more than do Black Americans. So they are more armed than we are. So it's not like we're preparing an army as African Americans and Black people to take over as soon as the police are defunded. And I appreciate so well how you all pointed out the different areas. And this really means redistribute the funds associated with law enforcement agencies. But can I say this, and this is not probably going to be very popular, saying defund the police has gotten their attention like nothing I've seen. I mean, we have been saying stop killing our Black men and Black women This is not right. We've had it on tape. We got it on video. And now when we start, because the police in many respects felt like they were above the law. They are the law, right? So many of them, whether they said it or not, the behavior reflected that perspective. And so for them to hear defund the police, words we've never heard before, we want you all to change. We want you to fix it. Well, maybe they needed to hear that to understand just how bad this relationship between Black America and the police is. And so something must be done. And no, we don't want to not have police officers out there, the right ones, protecting and serving, but it is time for a change. And if chanting this slogan can be a part of moving us to that change, then I support that kind of change.
Me too.
Yeah, there's no, don't feel bad about saying it that way, Pamela. I think that their attention, white people's attention, has been gotten, if you will. They are perhaps paying attention in ways that they hadn't been paying attention before. Ted, go ahead, because I know that you were going to.
No, I was just going to say it's a fascinating thing, because you're right. It was that verbiage. That verbiage got under more people's skin faster than so many things. And it wasn't even that people tried to look at what was behind the verbiage. It was just those 3 words, and boom, you had all sorts of people up in arms. Now, I love for people to get up in arms. Why? Because that's usually where there's some sort of progress or change. People get to the point where it's like, okay, I got to figure out what I think, what I feel, what I want to do. And I love what you all pointed out, that the redistribution may be the ultimate goal. Maybe that's what we want. None of us want anarchy, but we want it like any other large corporation or large organization. If it is problematic, you take a look at it. You don't just keep funding it the same way. You don't just keep allowing the behavior to happen. And it's a horrible thing, but the things that happened were so horrible and eye-opening for so many people who wanted to sweep it under the carpet for so long that you cannot ignore it anymore. Nobody's ignoring it. It is the topic of conversation, no matter what quote unquote side you're on. I don't want to be on a side. I want to be on the side of good, if that's what we're going to talk about. But people are talking about it. And what I want it to do is continue. I want it to be this, not stop until the next new crazy thing comes along. COVID 2. I want to see this go and continue, because I feel like, and maybe you guys can tell me, you all have experienced, I feel like the Pollyanna Ted believes that this is the first time in my lifetime where it feels like there is a possibility for real change. What do you guys think?
I agree.
I hope.
Go ahead, Rhetta. Please go ahead, Rhetta.
Yeah, I can only hope. I mean, we've seen so much historically where things look like they were gonna get great and they didn't. I think after Barack Obama was elected, someone said that's the end of racism. Yeah, right. It's so much, and not that I expected that, but some people really do expect that. I hear a lot of people also say, I don't see color. Well, I want you to see color.
That was my next question. Very good, Rhetta. All right. Tell me about that, because I want to talk about that, because I think, and I don't want to interrupt you, but that's such a good path to go down. People have said, well, Ted, I don't see color. And then I don't understand how to respond to that. Do you, as 3 Black adults, do you see color? And is it bad if I say I don't see color? Is it bad if I say I do see color? But that seems to be I'll use it as a cop-out. Those are my words, not anybody else's. Oh, I don't see color, Ted. Well, your actions say a whole lot different, because that is not anything what you're painting. So go ahead. I love this topic.
Yeah.
If you say, I'll say the same thing with regard to white privilege. If you don't want to see white privilege, if you refuse to see it, you're not going to see racism and race. If you refuse to see color, you're not going to see racism and race, and you're going to excuse yourself from that conversation. Now, you said something earlier, Ted, that about, and I'm going to paraphrase about.
Oh, did we lose you? I still see Pamela and Rhetta.
I'm still
He'll
here.
come back. He'll
Yeah.
come back.
You know, I'll finish what he was saying.
Please do,
You know,
please.
as far as not seeing color, you know, I always taught my daughter to see color, you know, but to also focus on character. You know, that's the most important thing. You know, if you're teaching your kids to see color and they're constantly, you know, looking a certain way at people of color, that could really have an impact on some of their, you know, relationships. You know, they'll be missing out on some of their best friends and, you know, so many other things. So definitely, I want you to see my color. I just don't want you to treat me differently.
How about you, Pamela?
Well, I agree. I don't think seeing color means that you are racist. I mean, God made us all different, and we have different unique aspects of each of our cultures. And I love spending time with my friends who are different from me. It's enjoyable. It's fun to learn about them and learn about what matters to them as we come together. And so I don't think that, but I don't think people mean any harm when they say they don't see color. They just don't really understand that. So you're marginalizing a part of me if you're saying you don't see that or acknowledge that. And so I think it's very important that we do realize that we are different, but you know, that's a good thing. You know, I talk a lot about innovation, and the greatest innovations come about when you bring different people together, people from different perspectives who have different appreciation and knowledge in different spaces and different experiences. So I think saying that I see color and I appreciate the differences, just like a beautiful rainbow, is really a much more constructive way to look at our differences.
I love that. I want to ask one last question because we're running out of time.
Okay.
I have noticed, and I want to see if you all have always experienced this or if this is just new. As I've started to become more vocal about and get more involved and try to become more educated, closeted racists have come out of the woodwork. I mean, it has been eye-opening for me. People who I have known for a very long time, if you bring up a topic, any of these things we talked about, you can see somebody's true colors, for lack of a better term. Wow, it comes out in full force. I had a guest on the show, and the show turned so quickly racist that I had to end it. Now that person I didn't want to call that person out because they were so closeted about it. I'm not sure they even knew what they were saying out loud. But I'm amazed at the number of people who have what I would personally consider a very racist approach to what's going on rather than a community cohesive collaborative approach. And so it has been eye-opening for me. And I would imagine you all have probably experienced the same thing. I mean, tell me with everything going on, have you experienced, last question, have you experienced an increase in what you would consider racist behavior around you and toward you, or a decrease?
I have to say it's the same. You know, I think people think that people are emboldened at this point because of who we had in the White House. I don't think so. I think people were emboldened when we had a Black man in the White House. You know, the way I feel is that it's still there. You know, people are still, there's still white supremacists around. There's still, you know, words and you know, words that are being used that should not be used. And our children are seeing that, you know. So I think it's been here and it's still here.
And see, Rhetta,
please go ahead, Pamela. Go ahead. Pamela.
Rhetta, I think it's a combination, and I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you. I think the combination of having a Black president for 8 years who was so well respected around the world, who was supported and upheld by so many people, and then getting a racist white president. I think those two things have brought out the closet racists, or those who were borderline. And I have seen it in people close to me. My daughter happens to be married to a white man, and his family, I've had them at my house before, and been with them together for many times over the last 15 years. And I never knew just how racist their thoughts were. And so I'm trying not to call them racist, but their behaviors, their thoughts, and the way they think. And they weren't bold enough to say that before. And perhaps they didn't think there was a need to, until when we got a Black president, for people who have that mindset that they think white is better, that was hard for them. And that's one of the things that I have observed. And then now you get someone else in the White House who has demonstrated so many aspects of being a racist, and they continue to support him. That I hadn't seen that kind of boldness in terms of the people's willingness to speak out about how they feel, which are racist perspectives.
I
use
Hank, how about you?
I use a lens. I use a lens of racial identity, because white folks at a point in time are confronted with the fact that their apple cart has been turned upside down by what they're seeing. And when that happens, you have a choice. A white person has a choice. Do I retreat back into where it's comfortable and where it's safe and where I see only my people and I don't have to deal with all those other people? Or do I push ahead and I seek out other white people such as myself, and I'm saying myself as a white person, who recognize that there's something that has to fundamentally change. There are the systems that are in place, and I keep coming back to that word. The systems that are in place were put in place through patriarchal white supremacy, and those systems have to change. And although it's our burden, the three of us and millions more, it's the problem of white people to solve. We can kneel and we can protest and we can do all other kinds of things, painted on the streets. We can go attend to rallies. We can support one another. But until white people decide that there's something that I have to do to push back against racism. Just something, as Ibrahim Kendi says, that I have to be anti-racist about what it is that needs to happen. Because if I'm colorblind, I'm not seeing race. If I want to sit on my white privilege, I'm not seeing race. And I'm just going to retreat back into that comfortable area. It's called reintegration in the lexicon of racial identity development for white people, after having a disintegrating experience, such as George Floyd, the lynching of a Black man on live television right in front of our eyes. And all of a sudden, white people are seeing things that this was supposed to, this happened years ago. How is this still happening now? So if white folks retreat, nothing is going to change. If white folks forge ahead and keep pushing ahead, and as John Lewis said, cause good trouble, they're going to find a lot of allies right there with them, who are causing good trouble as well, who have been who have been impacted by these systems of oppression for so long.
You all are amazing human beings. Thank you for taking the time out. I have about 75 million other questions on my list, but I want to be respectful of your time. I would love to continue the conversation at some point, because I feel like the more we continue, the more we get other people engaged. And we've had some people pop on and make some comments. So far, all positive. But I want people to feel comfortable asking questions that they don't feel comfortable asking to anyone else. I want there to be a platform, a respectful platform for people who don't get it to try to get it, to forge forward, like you were saying, Hank. So Rhetta Hussein, Pamela McCauley, and Hank Van Putten, you guys are amazing. Thanks for all you do for our world. My heart appreciate all of you.
Thank you. So nice to meet you, Rhetta and Hank.
Yeah, you too.
Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much. Guys, I promise if they'll come back, we'll come back. See you guys later.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.